What is up, everybody? Steve here. Thank you very much for your time today. Your time is valuable, so I really appreciate it. As a real estate broker here in Florida, I do get these questions in terms of should I sell my home in 2022? I'm going to talk about several things and several things to really just for you to ask questions to yourself as well as a discussion to have with your family because it is a big decision to sell your property and to sell your home. And I'm also going to talk about if it's an investment property or if it's your primary residence as well. And one of the reasons why I'm bringing this up into your attention is I'm in the process of selling my condo. It's kind of our, dream home, if you want to put it that way. It's a nice condo here in Southwest Florida on Bonita Beach. We love it, and there is a certain level of sacrifice associated with this move. And these are a lot of questions that we had to internalize and discuss amongst ourselves with me and Jolie and the kids. And, I think that it's important that I bring this to you guys as well if you guys are contemplating on selling your home in 2022. Now, I did another video on should you buy a home in 2022. So you guys probably want to take a look at that if you guys are in the process or thinking about buying in today's market. Buyer demand is still relatively high, even with mortgage rates going up. There are certain markets that are starting to flatten out, but buyer demand is high. So if there was any inclination of potentially selling, maybe right now could be the time. I mean, I feel like the reason why we're selling our condo is we're capitalizing on a very high market, in my opinion. Again, this is my opinion. You potentially have the opportunity to sell at peak prices, and it's truly unbelievable how high real estate prices have gotten. And I'm over here in Southwest Florida, and I'm looking at the gains that people are getting. And again, people are asking me these questions on YouTube as well as here on a local level if they should sell. And I'm not ever going to say yes, you should sell your home. That's just it. That would be poor advice. So let's talk about it. Tax implications. If you guys are not familiar, and again, I'm not an accountant, I'm not a financial advisor, so speak to the appropriate professionals. But there are tax implications. If you guys are thinking about selling your homestead, your primary residence, if you're living there for at least 24 months, your gain is free and clear. There's no taxes at all. That's actually how I've been able to grow and build my wealth over the years. I did another video I did a handful of videos on that as well. It's an incredible tool of basically just growing your wealth. And if done right, you can become mortgage free as well, which I highly recommend taking a look at those videos. So basically, if you live in the property for 24 months, and let's say you make $100,000 gain, you don't pay any taxes. Again, do some additional research with the IRS code. Again, that is if it's your primary residence. Now, if it's an investment property, you could do what's called a 1031 exchange. So if you sold a property, you made $100,000, you can technically defer paying taxes on that gain and defer it into another property. The problem that we're finding, especially in Southwest Florida, is finding a better property, finding a property that's going to cash flow. And I know a lot of people here on a local level, because Southwest Florida prices just skyrocketed, they are doing 1031 exchanges, but they're actually going out of the area. They're going into other states as well. So there's other opportunities for sure at better prices, better returns. So you just got to figure out, if it is investment property, where you're going to put that money or the tax implications associated with it. And even this property I'm in right now, I had to ask myself, is it worth it? Because we are going to have tax implications because we have not been here for a total of 2 years. So we are going to have a pretty sizable taxable event, unfortunately. But, again, I asked myself, is it worth it? Because the gain that we have on it, I think, is significant enough to go ahead and sacrifice for the taxable event that we're going to have. Another thing is, do you have buyer remorse right now? There's another article, and I'm going to do a video on it, kind of breaking it down. But new studies have come out that 75% of buyers have regrets, and they're having regrets because of the house is too small, or the house needed a significant amount of work, and they didn't anticipate putting that much money into the house. And some people are having regrets that they overpaid for it. And still in some markets there's crazy buyer frenzy, so there's a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out, and people got themselves into situations that, again, when you're going to an open house and there's 30 other people there lined up to get into one house on day one, it causes that frenzy, that emotional response. And I think a lot of people have bought houses that they might not necessarily appreciate, and could be an opportunity for you guys to sell and take your gain and move on, even if you guys are not in the property for 2 years. The next thing, and I want to do a full video on this because I think that people will get stuck. And what I mean by that is, let's say, and we don't know where the real estate market's going to go in terms of valuation. I personally think it will go down in price in most areas. Let's say it does. Do you have the ability to cut a check at closing? Because let's say you sold the property for what you paid for it, and you put, say, 3.5% or 5% down on the property. Even with that amount down, you have closing costs associated with the property, and you also have cost of renovation as well if you guys put any money into the property. So do you stand to lose money, and are you potentially going to be stuck, especially if you're thinking about selling in a 2-year period because you want to upsize or downsize, or you think that your job is kind of volatile in a sense where you might get moved from Florida to Connecticut, or you might have to move around the country or even around the state that you're in. Are you going to be stuck, which may provide another consideration of potentially selling the property? Excuse me real quick. Next thing I kind of mentioned on this is, if you guys are considering on selling in 2022, you got to factor in closing costs. State of Florida, we have commissions if you're going to hire a real estate professional. This is a live stream, by the way, guys. If you guys have questions, drop them in, and toward the end of this, I will answer any questions that you guys might have. State of Florida commissions if you hire a real estate agent. You have doc stamps on the deed, which is $100 or 70 cents for every $100, and you have title insurance and title related closing costs. You can factor in roughly closing costs being, if you paid, say, 6% commission, anywhere from 8 to 10% of the sales price. So let's say it's 10%, and it's a $300,000 home. You guys can figure, it's substantial costs associated with it. Also, if you're considering on selling, you want to factor in renovation costs. How much money did you put into the property, and are you going to get it out? So I have spreadsheets for every property I've ever purchased, and I'm very dialed in with my receipts and where I'm at and how much I paid, how much closing costs I had on the front end, all my renovations, and how much closing costs I had on the back end, to figure out really how much money I net on the sale of that property. And also taking in consideration, I'll call my accountant to figure out if I have a taxable event on it, and figure that money or that as an expense on it as well. And then I'm going to figure out and look at the bottom line and say, is this worth it? So I think it's important to figure out all of your costs kind of to the dollar. You got to factor in moving costs as well. I know a large percentage of people will actually hire moving companies to move all their stuff. Me personally, on majority of the properties I sell, and I live in more of a vacation destination, so we sell these properties turnkey, so it's very easy for us, which is another consideration that we took in. on selling this place because, you know, we sell turnkey. That means it's furnished. There's going to be plates, forks, knives. I mean, the person has to show up with a toothbrush and personal belongings, and they can start living here. That's not the case with a lot of people. A lot of people have a whole household full of stuff, especially if you're a hoarder. But you know, people have, you know, garages and attics full of just shit. So you know, there's a that to take in consideration. And also, do you have to put stuff into storage because you do have to move somewhere else, which we're going to talk about as well. um Giving up a low locked rate, that's, you know, that's one thing that I know a lot of people have trouble with and difficulty with is they're getting, you know, they're locked in at say 2.5% for a 30-year fixed, or even lower for a 15-year fixed. And that debt is so the interest on that debt is so low that it's like hard, it's very hard to give that up. Now there's a lot of talk about the because the debt position is so low that it's an asset, and I agree to a certain extent. But if that asset, if that property is actually being rented out, then I'll consider that debt as an asset because it's so damn low, and you're making, you know, a bigger return, or you should be making a bigger return over the interest rate calculation on it. So you'll be giving up, if you're in that debt position, you might be giving up a low rate, which you want to take in consideration as well. um doesn't make sense to keep it and rent it. You know, have a local real estate agent run numbers and figure out what you could get current day for rentals on your primary residence, if it is your primary residence. And maybe it makes sense. Maybe it makes sense to keep that cheap debt and rent the property. Again, these are all questions that I'm asking every day. People are asking me, should I sell? It's not my decision, it's yours, but you got to think about these things. So it doesn't make sense to rent it out. You know, if you're a PITI and maintenance on the property and everything else is, you know, call it $2,000, and you can rent that property for 3,000, you know, that could be a good cash flowing property for you guys to keep it long term in a portfolio, and could be a good retirement piece for you guys in the future as well. So if it's your primary residence, a big thing is where the hell are you going to go? Even right now, as it stands, this property is in contract. We're set to close April 22nd, and we still have no idea where the hell we're going to move to. Fortunately, the new buyers, they've been very gracious to allow us to do a lease back. Basically, a lease back allows us to lease the property back, and we're going to be here until I think end of July is what we agreed on. Now, that is something that you potentially could work out when you're selling the property, because right now there's such a demand for people buying properties that the sellers have leverage there. And as a seller, you know, we utilized it to our negotiation, that we kind of made it mandatory that we had to lease it back, just to make sure that the kids got through school, and we would move during the summer months here, which provides us opportunity if we want to get into another short-term rental property, whatever the case is. So, you know, again, where are you going to go and rent? You know, let's say you're going to go and rent for a year or 2 years. Have you studied the rental market, and does it make sense? You know, if you're blowing money on rent and you're making a gain of, you know, let's say $30,000, and you got to shell out $24,000 a year in rent, but your monthly payment was $1,200, then this situation might not make sense if you're going into a rental. So I would run numbers like that, run numbers based on your net, what you guys are going to net from the sale of the property, and figure out, are you getting enough money that, you know, pays for rental for a year, and does it all make sense? So I would run those numbers. Do you potentially have an you know, we sold all of our real estate. So unfortunately, you know, I wish we still had some other properties that we could move into, other rental properties that maybe when the lease was expiring, just give notification to them to that, you know, you're not going to renew the lease and then move into that property. So if you have a property, again, a lot of this is going to be sacrifice too. We're in a position, even like I said, on my primary residence, we're getting uncomfortable. We're sacrificing to get further ahead. Let me kill this email here. Um, to to get further ahead financially, and it's a lot of sacrificing. So yeah, you might have an investment property, and let's say that lease is coming up in a couple months. If you sold your house tomorrow, you could line it up where a close date could be 60 days out, and you can move into that investment property. And now that investment property might be a little piece of shit and might not be ideal, but you could go into that, live cheap, capitalize on your gain that you had on your primary residence, live into this rental for a year, 2 years, see what happens with the market, and then maybe get back into the real estate market and buy again. If you're going to buy again, have you really studied the market? Now, this is extremely important because, if you're buying to upsize or downsize and you're taking debt, obviously, if you locked in a mortgage in the last couple of years, you probably got a really good rate. And rates, they're peaking around 5%. They are significantly higher. So are you running the numbers? Is it going to put you in a better financial position? And or are you going to kind of be in a break even, or like we talked about before, buyer remorse? Are you stuck, or do you have buyer remorse? Do you have any issues with the property you're in right now? And let's say you're trading one house for another and it's kind of a wash, then maybe it makes sense. I don't know, but with rising interest rates, we were talking to somebody else the other day, and they were an older couple, and they were talking about downsizing because they're empty nesters and everything else. And when we figured out the analysis on basically selling that property, no longer having that cheap debt, going into a smaller property and taking on the current debt situation, current environment of the mortgage rates, they basically were a break even. So it was just like, I get it, it's more of a house to maintain, but why downsize if it's putting you in the same situation? If anything, I would just recommend keeping that asset, unless you have a significant gain where maybe you're going into this other asset and you're going to be free and clear on another property because you've made such a significant gain, and you're moving to another area where houses are cheaper and you can actually take that cash and pay cash for the property. I mean, these are all things that I would be discussing. I would figure out a 12 to 24-month plan in terms of where you're going to move to next. If it is your primary residence, I have not even figured that out yet. Coming into summer months here in Southwest Florida, it's when vacation rental properties are not as in demand. A whole lot of people don't come to Florida, South Florida specifically, to vacation in the summer months. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to jump into another vacation rental, and maybe hopefully on the beach around here somewhere, and at least get us into something for the rest of the year. So I kind of have that in my head lined up, that will be in some sort of vacation rental property until basically end of December. And then thereafter, I got to figure out where we're going to go next. And I'm always studying the market. Obviously, I'm a real estate broker, and I'm always studying the market to figure out if there's any good deals. And there's always good deals in any market. It's just a matter of finding them, putting the time in, and doesn't make sense. So, and lastly, I think a lot that I put on this channel is keeping personal overhead low, because if you can keep your personal overhead low and achieve financial freedom, you're going to be able to take additional money and reinvest it into other assets and everything else. So, I'm not a big fan of, selling one property and then going into a much larger property and a bigger debt position, because that's only going to hurt you financially. And I think that we're coming into a lot of financial turmoil with everything going on, from inflation and gas prices and the Fed increasing the rates, and a lot of turmoil worldwide. So I think that we could go into a recessionary period, maybe even a depressionary period. I don't know. But I think that whoever keeps their personal overhead as low as possible, has some cash stacked away for distressed assets, is going to be in really good shape. Um, Sorry if I'm butchering your name, Quinn Kian. Should I Airbnb condos, or is it easier for me to go through the apartment way? I don't know what you mean by that, but if you're talking about should you Airbnb as opposed to an annual rental, I would say that it just depends. I mean, it depends on cash flow, and it depends, especially if it's a condo. A lot of condo associations have a lot of rental restrictions, like this place, 30-day minimum, 12 times per year. So, if you're trying to rent it out weekly, it's just not going to happen. And, you can get in trouble for it too. So, um, anyway, guys, I appreciate your time today. I really do. It means a lot to me that you guys are on here. Thanks for being here. And if you're not a subscriber, I talk about the real estate housing market, everything that's going on, as well as a kick of personal finance. So consider subscribing if you guys have interest in any of that content. And appreciate you guys being here. Thanks a lot.